Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL. It's Friday, February 21st, the year of our Lord 2025. Good morning, Gamecock fans, and welcome into Coffee with JC Shurburtt. I am fighting a tiny bit of a cold this morning, so if I sound like a little stuffy or something, just bear with me. Sometimes I sound stuffy anyway, so maybe you won't notice. Hopefully you won't, but nevertheless, good to be with you here this morning. Good to get through another week. Thank you for listening, all that good stuff. Don't forget to purchase Gamecock Coffee to support NIL with Garnet Trust. It's kind of been a soft launch here, just kind of on the podcast. We've been talking about it, but we've got some bigger plans as far as getting the word out. And I want all of you to help get the word out as well. Take that URL, send it to the coffee drinker in your life, purchase gifts, all that good stuff. It's like I said, the old school fundraiser. It's like the wrapping paper of the world's finest chocolate bars, but hopefully on a much bigger scale. Certainly, NIL dollars are needed, and you can always email me if you have if you're not like on the big spur where you can ask me questions. You can email me, jcshurbert@gmail.com, just my name @gmail.com. If you have any questions about kind of how NIL is going to set up moving forward, that kind of thing. If you're interested in supporting the cause or helping out, certainly would appreciate any questions to do with that, because it's confusing right now with everything that's going on, revenue share and all that. And then everything is also based on like a what if. Like, what if this happens? What if Title IX? What if this, that, and the other? It sucks. I don't mind having topics that are interesting to talk about, considering, the number of shows we do and, the number of conversations we have on college football on a daily basis with regards to my job. I'm not complaining about that. But this whole notion of dramatic changes and doing one thing one day the next, it's with any industry, business, sports league, institution, whatever you want to call it, it's taxing. I mean, and that's no way to run a sport. So I'm hopeful that some of this stuff sort of settles down, but I think I've said that for about a year. So we'll see what happens. But there is a common sense thing in place as to why there needs to be NIL and why there needs to be revenue share on top of that. And it's not for those of you panicking out there, because some people think that, oh my God, these big schools, they have this, that, and the other. And I'm like, what big schools? I mean, are you talking about Ohio State? Well, they're not going to sustain 38 million in the hole in their athletic department. Now, that wasn't all NIL. In fact, it shouldn't be. It would be maybe against the rules if they just took operational money and bundled it into their collective. I don't think many schools are doing that. But outside of schools in Texas and a smattering of others, and you'd be surprised. I've talked to people at other schools. You'd be surprised at the struggle that you wouldn't expect, at some of these places, and the whole common, I guess common sense thing where you go, oh well, this happens, like the whole notion that Arkansas has all this money because of Walmart and Tyson Chicken. They do have money because of Tyson Chicken and basketball, and Jerry Jones. I mean, Jerry Jones has been on the record. He ain't giving them a dime for NIL. And their situation in football is Hunter Yurachek said it. Their AD. And so the whole, the whole back in the day thinking, you got to throw that away. I mean, it's hard. It's hard because this is a sport based on largely on tradition and consistency and habits and all that. I mean, how many of you out there sit in the same seats at Williams-Brice and have for years? Raise your hand. I wish I could raise my hand because I can think of nothing better than to have a nice little place at the stadium to sit, make friends with the people around you. I know a lot of you do that. I mean, that's like everything in the sport. And now it's like what we all used to think doesn't really apply anymore. I mean, Georgia and Alabama, there was a big article in the Athletic about their NIL plight or revenue plight or how to pay the players plight. Those are the two best programs in the SEC, for the last 6, 7 years collectively. Um, I just look at it and I think that, and we talked to Darren Usher yesterday on the show, and I encourage everybody to go to YouTube and check out that video. It's 50 minutes long, but it's a lot of good stuff. If you're listening to this, you obviously care about recruiting. I would go check that out. And he kind of dug into some of the philosophy with recruiting and stuff at South Carolina, and I think that if you can continue to do that and sustain it, that that's the secret sauce. I mean, you have kind of buckets you pull players from. You take the right players from those buckets. You make sure you have the critical factors that athletically and talent wise that you need. And then you develop them either short term or long term. And it's interesting, this notion of a short term development, because the player development, when you say that, you start thinking, well, like Jim Grobe at Wake Forest. Jim Grobe won at Wake Forest during his career there. And Dave Clawson continued this. And this is while Wake was better than their historical average for a while. And you just automatically redshirted when you went to Wake Forest. There's no question that you wouldn't be on the field first year. You'd be part of a program. And then by the time those guys got to be juniors and seniors, they would cycle up and win 8 games. Plus, they're in the ACC. That was kind of the philosophy there. I think Kentucky under Mark Stoops to get to where they were did a good job of things like that. And that's an old school way of doing it. But when we thought about player development, we thought long term. Redshirt your guys, save eligibility, build players, and then by third or fourth year, you're going to cycle up. And then at different levels of, Alabama obviously brought in some guys whose baselines were higher, and they would play true freshmen, but they were very good at player development. The development at Alabama and the maximizing of the talent was why they were dominant. It wasn't because they signed the 5 stars all the time. That's a big mistake people make. As far as the success Nick Saban had, it wasn't just the on paper 5 stars, because there were schools around Alabama that were a couple of points away from being number one that they go 5-7. I mean, and they would string together top 5 classes and 5-7 or 7-5 or whatever, losing freaking seasons, folks. So I look at it like that, the short term development, because and I'll repeat this, what John Strickland said the other day, because it's really stuck with me about the guys out of the portal South Carolina gets. And he said, it's guys from lower levels that have done well. And then there's guys that were at bigger schools that maybe haven't done much. And I started thinking about just kind of how far Kyle Kennard came in one season, one off season of a season at South Carolina. I mean, it was fine tuning. The talent was there. He was already kind of built. It wasn't like he came in at 210 pounds and got to be 260 in a year. And that was that kind of thing. It was, hey, play a little smarter, play a little bit, be a little bit more productive, play a little more consistent. And you see what happened with that. Torricelli Simpkins. Another example, a guy that came from HBCU, he was already good, but you have to have some short-term development, I think, to get, to get good in the SEC. Josh Simon, he's at Western Kentucky. How much better did he get? And I still could make a case for him playing more in 2023, but I mean, he turned it on this past year. That was a 2-year deal. With the exception of like Rocket Sanders and And I think Spencer Rattler did get better here as far as when you talk about quarterbacking, the type of systems he learned at South Carolina and reading defenses and things like that. But Rocket Sanders, Spencer Rattler, there are some guys that they've signed from the portal that step in with limited eligibility and do a fantastic job. And probably wasn't much they did with them as far as developing. I think they developed Rocket physically as far as getting him healthy, getting him back up and running. That was that kind of rehab project. But we talked about a lot of that yesterday, and I think this too. I think all the credit in the world for South Carolina being able to develop players, right? And all the credit to the coaches and strength staff and nutrition staff, which is all big. But I also think a lot of these guys, when you look at their rankings coming out of high school or wherever, they're just underrated, just missed. You just missed. The industry missed on them. They didn't, they either did not project them to be as good as they ended up being, or they ended up, ignoring them. They didn't take the time to do it, that type of thing. And so we'll see what happens moving forward. But a really good interview with Darren Usher. And, we've dug into kind of the types of players that South Carolina brings in, hitting the sweet spot and all that. And I think to wrap it back into this NIL thing and the new world thing that I got off of, by the way, GamecockCoffee.com, right? I think South Carolina has found a formula there. And I think this too, this is something for all of us, the fan base, myself. You have to understand that with the expectations across the board, like we talked about on the show the other day, with South Carolina wants to be good at a lot of different sports. Unacceptable, this basketball season to a lot of people is unacceptable. The men's, they want to build Ray Tanner's baseball program, Dawn Staley's women's basketball program across the board, and it's not like it is a football school. Football is number one, but it's much more situated, like say in Oklahoma, where they want to be good at everything. And Oklahoma is a good comparison for a lot of reasons. Compared to like I don't know, name of footballs, Penn State. Do you ever heard much? I think Penn State's got a hockey team they get behind. Penn State went to the tournament in basketball. Their coach left for Notre Dame. Everybody thought it was a miracle. Penn State's baseball team came down to South Carolina. Gosh, I guess that's 10 years ago, because I had just gotten into town, moved back to Columbia from Nashville, and I went to the game with Whittle on a March evening. And Penn State came to town. Carolina beat them up pretty good. But, it's not baseball. Women's basketball, I think, has had some minutes up there. But Penn State's a football school, and they're one of the very best in the country. They'll probably be preseason number one. But at South Carolina, that there's standards in other sports that are high, and to Gamecock fans' credit, they care. You guys care. We all care. And that's good. Because frankly, your college sports season that you care about doesn't necessarily end in November, which it looks like if they do away with the bowls, those seasons are going to end with the Clemson game. If the Clemson game is still there, but that's a different topic. I don't want to get off on that. Nevertheless, I think that when you're looking at that, and you're also facing the reality of, it's not Oklahoma traditionally or Ohio State traditionally. And that's money and resources and everything else. There's plenty of money at Carolina. Don't get me wrong. I mentioned some schools earlier. Carolina's situation's arguably better than some of the traditional powerhouses of college football. It's scattershot. And guess what? That's an equalizer when you talk about football. But what about everything else? Well, that takes money, a lot in today's era in college sports, and care and passion and all the intangible things that people bring to the table. And a lot of those boxes are checked. But resource wise, it's you got to kind of figure it out, which is why I think in all sports you have to be the coaches have to find a formula. Okay, South Carolina, like in men's basketball, I don't care. I mean, they're going to have to go to the NCAA tournament and have deep runs and pack the arena in November, maybe, to overcome the stigma around that program. Okay. And you got to overcome the stigma around that program to get to the place where your lottery picks, right? Your lottery picks will give you a second look. And that's both within and out the state of South Carolina. So you have to win for a while. So how do you win? How do you have the season like you had last season? Well, Lamont and his group last year was great. They figured it out. I'm telling you, this is my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. The SEC historically, not this season, this is a historical season. Historically, the difference between the SEC and say the Big 12, or when the ACC was worth a flip, the ACC. Everybody had good athletes. The SEC probably had better athletes. That's why most teams were good on defense and block shot, guarding the ball, all that. But those other leagues had basketball players, guys that were skilled, guys that could shoot, guys that would kill you from three. They ran good offense and all that. Last season, South Carolina team that won 26 games and went 13-5 in the league. They had basketball players, right? They had really good basketball players, and Lamont Paris has a good system. Is it Rick Barnes' system at Tennessee, where you're automatically, if you have even close to the right players, regardless of talent, you're going to win games? Probably not. I wouldn't say that. It's different than Coach Barnes' system, but and it's not as proven, but it's a system that will work. I mean, it's beautiful when sometimes this team, even this year, will get it together. And then also pass, boom, boom, guys wide open to the basket. Beautiful, beautiful basketball. And they consistently played that last year. And so that's the way, and it doesn't, Lamont Paris, no Lamont Paris, whatever, being a system team and kind of going against the grain in the SEC. Don't try to do what everybody else does right now, especially out athlete people, because you're not going to win that. You need to out basketball them. And I think that there's ways to out basketball them with a system, with just coaching. I think that's been proven. And it's only Tim. You do that, and then in basketball, you do that till you win, and then all of a sudden you just have ballers everywhere. It's not like Wisconsin, where Lamont Paris was, where you're limited in a lot of ways because of geography and competition and recruiting for players in Chicago, which is a big basketball hotbed. It's 2.5 hours from Madison, where you have to kind of go and be different. I don't think you have to do it long term. Maybe you will, but it's not like you can never get there talent wise. And in football, I think so much of it's roster building. You got to have good schemes and good coaches, and you got to be fun and creative and have culture and all that. But I think so much of it's roster building in today's era that you probably want to take advantage of what you've got and be resourceful in recruiting. Because I have a little theory here, and we'll see if it plays out. Most of my assumptions about all this have ended up being correctly short term. I don't know that we've yet had market corrections and things like that in NIL where we can go, well, there's this 10 years worth of data, and this is kind of what happens most of the time. So it could change. I could be wrong. But the schools that signed 22 four-stars, if you go back and look at the percentage of those guys that were highly rated, that are it's that kind of middle part of your class that numerically, according to the 24/7 sports um, algorithm, that formula that boosts your ranking up. It's that middle part, that's really important because they count the top guys more, and then it goes all the way down. So the middle and then on down, that's the differentiator because everybody's got some top guys, right? Look at the outbound portal players that were. You'd be surprised. And then go back and recalculate. Probably those schools still finish high, but you're not looking at a wave of impact. And like I said earlier, the red shirt and develop and all that. When players couldn't transfer out, they'd probably just they'd be unhappy. I think probably you'd be surprised 50% of freshman football players end up being miserable their first year because they're so used to playing all the snaps and being great and having their butt kissed, and then it's reality, and most of the time it doesn't even have a reward because you're redshirt and you got to go to class and blah blah blah. I think NIL money maybe makes it a little better, but most players want to play, and so that they don't understand the process. So they just get out, and they probably have people telling them how good they are. You need to just go. You don't have to stick with this. And I think the mindset of highly rated guys coming out for a lot of reasons, not that they're bad people or they don't get it, is that, and we're just gonna bounce, right? And I'm not saying you need to go get lower rated guys or guys with less talent. I think you gotta take advantage of, like I said, your opportunities and what gets you there. And at South Carolina, that's in-state talent. Always has been. South Carolina players stick with South Carolina. I'm not saying there's never a transfer. There is. I'm not saying all of them are great because they're not. There's guys that transfer out. But they're generally players. If you get the top guys in South Carolina, you're going to be pretty good in most sports, really, but especially in football. You have to supplement. Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you think about the program at the University of South Carolina, when it cycled up, it's been in-state guys. It's been in-state guys. Not all the time, right? But primarily. And the good thing about what Beamer's doing is that they're going out of state in a way that makes sense to supplement that. And then the transfer portal, like what Darren Usher was talking about, getting the right people. And so that's their formula, and the formula paid off to the tune of being a terrible call or a missed field goal at Alabama, or a missed if you think they would have won the LSU game in overtime, a missed field goal against LSU. For being in the playoff, not only the playoff but the SEC championship game. I think I told you guys I went through and did all the tiebreakers with Georgia, and the Gamecocks would have won it. Imagine going to Mercedes-Benz. I've been looking forward to this game at Mercedes-Benz against Virginia Tech for a long time because I love the stadium. And I think games in Atlanta are good for most Southern football teams to go play in because you usually have thousands of alums. You make them happy. It's the place where there's national title games and SEC championship game every year and all that. It's where you want to be. It's a special event. The Georgia Dome was really special, I thought. Mercedes-Benz can be special. It's a really cool place to watch a game. But how cool would it have been to go early and play the mighty Texas Longhorns, which I think South Carolina would have matched up pretty well. Like the Gamecocks been playing at their best like they were at the end. I don't know. But that roster got you there. Okay. That roster got you there. And it was that combo: portal, in-state development, short-term development, long-term development, blah, 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 blah. And right now, like I said, we don't have 10 years worth of evidence. Right now, South Carolina's hit that sweet spot. And so, when you think about all of that's on a good track. Baseball hit the height, the pinnacle of the sport largely with a nice formula. I mean, absolutely they had some stud players. But so does football right now. Dylan Stewart. That's just there's no talk with Dylan. That's no oh well, this is part of a philosophy, or that this is just like this guy's really, really, really damn good, and he's elite, and we want him. Let's get him. Okay. And then he gets there and he's elite. And he puts in the work too. I mean, Dylan Stewart is a extremely hard worker. He didn't miss a single practice last year, I was told. How about that? Just a hard, you know, he's got you hear his term blue collar players, and you always think blue collar players, well, they probably, they make up for talent with hard work and all that. And, Dylan is a blue collar player with dare I say white collar skill set. Those guys are pretty dangerous. Those are guys that win Super Bowls and things like that, are all pro. Nevertheless, didn't mean to get off track there, but in baseball, you remember Coach Ray Tanner, how he sort of built it, and this hit me last week too when we were talking to him. That interview is also up on our YouTube page. Be sure to like and subscribe. But you know what they would do. Jim Tillman was his recruiting coordinator, and they would, first of all, they had a base of in-state talent. They got all the top guys in South Carolina. And then they would go and find guys elsewhere, North Carolina, all over the place. A lot like Shane Beamer, Ray Tanner wasn't afraid to go out to different states. I mean, he was talking about going to California and trying to find a guy. And you look at Beamer. I mean, the two starting linebackers last year, Bam Martin Scott and Debo Williams, and I know Bam Martin Scott started, but Demetrius Knight played a whole lot. So, but that they were listed as the starters. So one was from Indiana, one was from Delaware. That's weird, Gamecocks may start a linebacker from Germany this year, and so they're willing to go anywhere to find players. But there's also little pools that you dip into. You got your go-to. And I've talked about what that is on the high school level. But in baseball, back in the day, what they would do is they would go into the JUCO ranks, specifically in Florida, maybe California, Texas, wherever. And what they would do when they would lose players is fill. And back then in baseball, if you were good, a junior college transfer is probably a year. The Brandon Packs of the world, and it worked. And maybe 2 years. Look at the football roster construction. It's the same kind of thing. You have, a baseline of in-state talent and other areas where the Gamecocks go recruit, Georgia, North Carolina. They're trying to get into Virginia, the DMV. And then they go portal to fill needs. 1, maybe 2 years. This year's portal class that's arriving in 2025, I don't think there's maybe one. I'd have to go check. Yeah, Rasul Faison is a 1-year guy at running back. Most all of them, though, do have more eligibility left. So it's 1 or 2 years, short-term development, and it wins. And if you can do the culture part right, which Coach Tanner and Coach Tolman did back in the day, you can blend a roster that quick. In football, it's hard. Baseball's got a bigger roster too, unlike basketball. So if you look at that blueprint, and it hit me in the face like a stack of pancakes. Could you imagine a stack of pancakes flying and hit you? By the way, do you remember, speaking of baseball, Joey Pancake hit a home run on National Pancake Day? Anyway, I like that. I like that idea. I think, I'm not predicting the SEC championships and national championships in football. I would never do that. The sport's hard. It can humble you in a minute. I know most of you are sitting out there thinking the same thing could happen in football that happened in basketball after the off season of hype and confidence in basketball. It could. I don't expect it, but I didn't expect the basketball team to be 0-13. I also look around at the other football programs in the league and don't really see where, unlike the basketball programs, you look and, oh, God, they got everybody coming back. Plus, they added these guys and that guy, and blah, 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 blah. Just like last season, most of the programs around the SEC have question marks. Like had Alabama gone out and gotten players like, and they would have had to have been like more than three, but if they'd have gotten, let's say they'd have got nine players that were just studs, like on the level of a Judkins at Ohio State last year. Um, they've got a lot of players back. The Tide does. They don't have a quarterback. Let's say they would have gotten Lenora Sellers. Had him for some crazy reason, he'd have left and gone to Bama. Yeah, national championship, I think. And oh God, there's not something in football. There's just not. You don't look around and see that. You're like, well, they got some question marks. They got some question marks. But A&M brought in some big name players from the portal, like they always do. Brad Crawford picks them to go 6-6. I mean, it's a crazy enough to say because football is the dominant sport in this conference. It's a little more wide open, but I can't. Anything can happen, man. I mean, you look at Florida State. Mike Norvell's a really good coach. Really good coach. Uh, they had money to spend. They had a personnel director that's the general manager that I think made some horrible decisions in the portal, and everybody went along with it, and especially at quarterback. They just hitched their wagons to him, and everything else just DJ and everything else fell apart around it. They didn't really play all that well around him either. Just to be honest, they didn't really have a lot of great players, and then the attitude stunk once they started losing, and they kind of realized we're not very good. Instead of digging down deep and competing, there was a lot. It's just a lot of, oh, here we go again. So anyway, that can happen to the best, and I think that's why when you see Luke Day having bonding, and you see, the guy they did the whole meet somebody thing yesterday. If you look at the video where they gave Colin Bryant the scholarship, and they got Shane Beamer got Mazio to do it. They did the meet somebody, right? You ever done that? Like, oh, I used to hate at conferences and stuff. Look around and shake somebody's hand, ask them how they're doing, and I'm like, how about no? I'm just, I'm kind of a purpose. If I'm in a social setting, I'll meet everybody there and have conversations, and it's not like I'm a recluse. But if I'm there for like a business purpose, I don't want to talk to anybody. But look, if you're part of a team and you got 39 new guys coming in, they're not all there right now, but around at least 30, and you got to get to know these folks, then hey, great. Do that. Do that every day. I remember at church when reach around to somebody behind you and shake their hand and tell them God bless you. That was awkward too, especially when I was visiting another church. But hey, church is basically a team, and so it's good. So that's why you do all those things, and that's why Beamer's big on it. Still, at the end of the day, unforeseen circumstances can derail you in college sports these days, and all that good stuff. But I do think that the ingredients are in place there for there not to be a big letdown next season. And I do think that moving forward, like I said, we don't have 10 years of data yet, but we got like 3 or 4. I think this is the sweet spot in recruiting. I think sometimes, myself included, the expectation was after having the season they did and being in the conversation and more NIL money that, oh my God, it's going to be like Ole Miss Junior over here. Look, man, that was I knew in my heart it was never going to happen. I don't necessarily think I had the heart to just explain that all the time, because I appreciate the fact people get excited about recruiting in general, whether that's portal or high school. But it just that they're not going to go out and take the obvious all the time. But if they keep getting double-digit players drafted, which I don't know, that's not something that I would predict either, because I mean, there hasn't been more than 7 drafted out of South Carolina since the 50s, and that's when there were 360 players selected and 30 rounds. Man, yeah, that's a lot. That's an expansion draft, but and they had 9 then. There's never been double digits. So an outlier like that, is it going to be an outlier, or is it going to be the start of a new era or tradition? A start of Will it be something common moving forward? So, I mean, I think with all of these, I guess 2-year guys from the portal that they got, that number's probably going to be a little less next season if they get 10 drafted or whatever. But as long, the end game is what matters. It's not how high was your recruiting class that's important. The important thing that you need to do if you're going to look and see if you're doing in recruiting is looking back and seeing how many good players did you bring in. At the end of the day, a guy like Torricelli Simpkins that's going to be drafted that was a 0-star, or a guy like Demetrius Knight Jr., who probably you could circle as probably one of the biggest losses on the whole roster, given his leadership. And again, Darren shed some light in on that. Who was a low 3-star option quarterback from a private school in Atlanta that went to Georgia Tech and played special teams for 3 years. Did nothing. Not did nothing, but did not was not a guy you talked about. Now they're talking about him being Darren said first rounder. I've seen some second rounds out there with him. He's fast, runs 22 miles an hour. I mean, it's not just that he's a great guy and a leader and a mature guy and all that. He's a great athlete and a great player. And you got to have that. The one thing you can't have is a bunch of roster of guys that are just good enough to get you beat talent wise. And that's not what they're doing. I mean, they've got good players. You got 2 linebackers in the portal class that Nick Saban evaluated and wanted at Alabama. And we've talked about how good he is at that. And I think they've got the coaching staff to develop them. And the off-field stuff is really, really, the nutrition continues to be elite at South Carolina. That used to, you remember when the nutrition plan was like Steve Spurrier saying, I just don't think our guys need to go to Bernie's or Bojangles all that much anymore. All that fried food. And that was the extent of it. Now it's like a wellness spa in the building. You got great facilities. There's not a single recruit that you talk to. I don't talk to recruits anymore because I was involved with NIL, and it's ethics wise, I don't want to get into that. But I talk to Hale, who talks to recruits, I talk to other people that talk to recruits, and I read what they say. There's not a single one that doesn't say, "Man, South Carolina's nutrition is off the chain," and that helps. Because that helps you perform on Saturdays and hit your weight goals and all that good stuff. The strength staff, whatever tweaks Luke Day and his staff made, and Luke's got some great assistants too that have track records. Whatever they made this past offseason, South Carolina, but from the end of 23 until 24, you noticed a physical difference. The eyeball test, so to speak. So you have to have all of that, and you have to nowadays. You don't have 4 years to do it. You got 2 in many cases, and I think South Carolina so far is on the right track. So that was today's topic of roster building and winning and formulas and stuff like that. I want to just kind of touch on that. Good Friday topic. We'll get back into everything else next week. Did want to mention from Tom Loy some quarterback recruiting notes that we'll probably get into on the show today. So he thinks Jared Curtis, who we talked about yesterday, 5-star from Nashville, is Georgia 1, Oregon 2, South Carolina 3, Auburn 4. The only thing based on some of my intel, I don't know that Georgia's necessarily won. And that's just based on some feedback I got on that, the Athens end of things. I think Oregon's probably a good stop. But he also mentioned, and Tom Loy, by the way, is 24/7 Sports national recruiting reporter. Great reporter, good guy, not biased, just reporting what he hears. He also said that Curtis and his recruitment takes a lot of twists and turns. So we'll see what happens ultimately. I wouldn't be surprised North Carolina, they give them a cup of coffee in it because of Belichick too. Landon Duckworth, and I continue to not feel great about him and the Gamecocks, Ole Miss and Florida State. With Brady Smeagol, I think that's the guy South Carolina. I think if they really pushed and got the deal done, they could get him. I also think the University of Washington in Seattle loves this kid and is willing to pay a whole lot. Uh, it's South Carolina NIL wise, or rev share wise now because it's a 26 kid. They're going to lay all that out. They've laid it out for Curtis, so that's happening. I don't know the specifics. Even if I did, I probably wouldn't. I'm not going to share all that, but I don't. I honestly, I'm not. I would tell you, I know, but I'm not going to talk about it. So that's the latest there. That I know that kind of sounds probably disappointing, but look, it's quarterback recruiting, and with Curtis, I feel better now about South Carolina and Curtis than maybe I did a couple of months ago. And like I don't feel great. I'm not crystal balling him to the Gamecocks, but I'm saying don't count him out. And if we get all the way to the weekend of June 20th, and Tom did report official visits are going to be really important here, then you got a chance to blow him away and all that good stuff. Probably Duckworth's the one I feel the least good about, just because it's very rare for a player to commit really, really early and then decide, oh, I'm going to open it back up, and then almost commit somewhere else, and then add you back on to the list. I, I don't know. I also think he's a really good fit for Gus Malzahn and what he does on offense. And obviously, Lane Kiffin and what he does with quarterbacks would be attractive. And Lane's personally recruiting him. And so he's from Alabama. It's one state over instead of two. I don't know. That's just my gut. Nobody panic. I think South Carolina's going to be fine. And look, here's the beauty of the transfer portal, folks. And then I got to get off because this has been way too long. And I just did this off the top. I had something else I was going to talk about today. Um, I Here's the thing. At quarterback, if you miss on your top high school guys and there's not a guy that pops up that you love like Cutter Woods, then great. You just go to the portal if a need arises down the road, or you move on to 2027. That's the beauty of it. You definitely want to sign a big time guy. You want to be like Ohio State and just throw them all in there. They're all good, and then you're going to lose some to transfer. Oh well, we'll go to the portal. Even they had to go to the portal and get a quarterback this year. I mean, I think that's a good way to do it because you got competition and you're going to have a good quarterback just about every year. You don't want to go, it's kind of funny with Shane Beamer since he's been here. He goes through years where it's like this situation, and fans will say, this situation is inexcusable. Well, the quarterback situation in 21. Have you noticed that since then, South Carolina hadn't really been quarterback's been in pretty good shape, and they're even taking guys to be backups to backups and things like that. Running back was bad a couple of years ago. Boom, there you go. We're gonna have plenty of running backs now. Offensive line, they're fanatical about hitting their numbers after what happened in 2023. That receiver is flipping. Go listen to what Darren said about the receiver, the freshman receivers. So, but that's interesting. So yeah, that's the good news about the transfer portal and quarterback. So anyway. Yeah, getting out of here now. Gamecocks play Texas in men's basketball Saturday night. Hey, they'd be nice to get a win. It's always good to beat Texas, I think, in anything. And I think we'll all learn that as they continue their journey in the SEC. Gamecock baseball team plays Milwaukee this weekend. I think it used to be UW Milwaukee, but now it's just Milwaukee. 3 game set, chance to get to 8-0. And get rolling on that end. So that should be a good weekend of Gamecock baseball and basketball and all that good stuff. Don't forget the show later today with Phil and myself. It'll be back to just us, and then Jamie Bradford will be along with the morning show. And remember, it's one big stream now, so you just get on the YouTube stream or the stream on the app, and you get it. Thanks for listening to Coffee. Don't forget GamecockCoffee.com, folks. I'll be back Monday. JC Shurburtt signing off. Holler at you soon.